bring you Killer Woods, episode 53. Death in the Jungle. These are the case facts against Ann Payton, who shot her husband while he slept. Isn't trust a bitch?
The big eye in the sky is always watching.
Costa Rica, famous vacation home for Tom Cruise, Lady Gaga, but also made famous for the murder of one Mr. John Bender. Believe it or not, in some circles, rich wives have more disdain for their wealthy husbands than a reluctant bride at the bottom end of the spectrum would. Such was the case amongst this beauty in the most unique home on the planet, a home that lay just beyond this pure stream in the heart of the richest rainforest on Earth. Now, I guess one would hardly call it a home when its size encompassed 4 average-sized residences on a tract of forest that most major farmers would envy. Best of all, this secluded modern-day Garden of Eden only had to cater to 2 residences. One was a Wall Street tycoon who was worth $500 million, and the other was a woman he married after achieving his fortune. The couple lived here briefly in Talamanca Mountains near the town of Florida de Baru in Costa Rica. Their walking path each morning was the home of the yellow-throated toucan, and a home that cost them $68 million to build. For a man's enemies are those of his own household. I guess the old biblical quote is made anew each day in many homes. At least it was for the Bender home. John and Ann Bender's marriage read like a Pulp Fiction novel. A novel packed with every trope of the genre, astounding wealth, tales of alleged diamond smuggling, and bouts of madness set against the backdrop of a tropical rainforest, and the most beautiful tropical rainforest. And before the age of 30, John F. Bender would ultimately become a multimillionaire after graduating with honors in biophysics from the University of Pennsylvania in the year 1988. Now, 10 years after his graduation, Ann Patton would meet John Bender, then a Wall Street investor, at a private gathering in Virginia. But we'll come back to that in just a moment. Now, John was a burly, bearded son of a high-ranking Justice Department official. At the height of his Wall Street success, he ran several arbitrage funds and had a personal net worth of upward of $600 million. So the boy was almost a billionaire. Now, working on that type of sleepless commission-driven schedule would eventually take a toll on John's mental and physical health. To find solace in life, John would purchase a sprawling farm in Virginia far away from the hustle and bustle of Wall Street. Then, in 1998, John threw a get-together of like-minded individuals at his country house in Virginia. A friend introduced him to a Brazilian-born Ann Maxine Payton, whose beauty and intense passion won him over immediately. Now, little did John know that one day this woman would murder him in cold blood. Ann saw for herself an easy mark and a man who was already rich before she met him, and she wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Ann began in earnest visiting John's house every day, staying for hours at a time. From their first encounter, the two bonded over their collective struggles with bipolar disorder and depression. 3 weeks later, John asked her to marry him. Now, beyond emotional struggles, the two for a time would be united by a shared love of animals and environmental conservation. But mainly, Ann would be finally united with John's money as she wished from the start. And usually when you marry this quick, it's for something else. The commonalities of animals and the environment would birth the idea to move beyond John's farm to the rainforest in order to make this shared dream a reality. In the year 2000, Bender and Patton would end up leaving stateside, renouncing citizenship, and move to Costa Rica. According to the book Stock Market Wizards by Jack D. Swagger, John Bender had been considered, even in print, as a successful stockbroker, seemingly a successful stockbroker who needed to get off a fast-moving train. Upon Bender's arrival in Costa Rica, he suffered a brain aneurysm. Now, following that life-threatening medical emergency, Bender cashed out all of his stock holdings and retired to the rainforest for the next chapter of his life. And sometimes in life, you just have to move on. $600 billion won't buy your health any better. Now, more health conscious now, John and Ann began to eat pre-cooked and frozen food that they designed themselves. John also became very careful of his fat and sugar intake while pursuing his dreams. And boy, was that a big dream that even the friends he left behind couldn't understand. Now, to make his sanctuary for animals a reality, John applied for an animal refuge license under the name Boracay del Sur Wildlife Refuge. Now, the refuge will consist of 14 farms for a total of 306 hectares of virgin forest. He obtained a declaration on November 4, 2002, by decree of the Costa Rican Ministry of Environment and Energy. Now, on the day Bender's license was granted, little did he know that he had only 2,622 days left to live, that number of days before his wife would kill him. Now, during the 4 years it took to construct the home and refuge to Boracay, the couple both enjoyed living casual. Oftentimes they were seen wearing jeans, boots, hats, and dark sunglasses. But over the years, secluded in a mountaintop retreat, the couple became ever more reclusive and began to resemble a scene out of the movie The Shining. Their tastes became more eccentric and obsessive. Now, although there were several employees that lived and worked on the property, the Benders were the only ones that lived in the main house. A house void of children, seldom visited by family, and surrounded by sounds of very loud and natural wildlife. I mean, every bird around there, you could hear them because they squawked so loudly. Now, the Benders built their house with the panoramic views in mind, constructed of glass and no external walls. From the top floor, one could see all the way to Panama and Nicaragua. As is our custom on Killer Wives, we bring you the viewer into the actual residence of the murdered to show you where the crime occurred. Now, we do this not in an attempt to cause gory feelings, but to let viewers see just what type of luxurious life these wives were willing to throw away. Here is an inside view of the couple's multi-million-dollar estate, as well as the 5,000 acres of animal reserve with employee housing that surrounded it. Florida de Baru found it hard to believe that in their mountains, rich foreigners would build a conservatory-style reserve. Boracay, as it would come to be named, cost millions of dollars to build. Today, this property now sits empty and is up for sale at a bargain basement price of $12 million, legally, by the same woman who killed her own husband. The Benders moved to Costa Rica in 1998 and spent 4 long years building this elaborate, secluded compound on 5,000 acres of land in the heart of the Costa Rican jungle. This home came complete with a circular glass house atop a mountain overlooking a 600-foot waterfall. The home is naturally surrounded by wildlife including sloths, monkeys, and parrots. If this gym was built in Hollywood, it would make an excellent movie location. But even the largest movie studio in the world, being Universal, is made up only of 400 acres. For the context of size, maybe it is better to compare AT&T's Dallas Cowboys Stadium property in acreage to include parking, and you would have 73 acres. The Benders could seemingly place 68 of those stadium-style facilities, including the oversized parking area, comfortably on the land they owned. In Dallas, the current value of Cowboys Stadium is $1.3 billion. If we use the same value to price the land here, it will be worth $88,400,000,000. But John Bender did not come here to sell his dream home any more than he wanted to leave it once it was built. After renouncing their collective U.S. citizenships and becoming permanent residents in their adopted country, John and Ann got down to the business of building the home of their dreams. 4 years later, the Benders were living in this breathtaking 9-room, 5-story, 8,000 square foot glass mansion, which came with an elevator, helipad, moat, and an interior that was lit with 550 Tiffany lamps until the night of his murder. The Benders' secure compound also boasted a sculptured garden and reflected pools stocked with fish. From the peak of the mountain, one has a view of the coastal mountain range going through breathtaking waterfalls and some of the most iconic tropical wildlife habitats in existence. A group of American botanists who visited the refuge was ecstatic about what they found there. Magnificent views of Pacific beaches and coral reefs 3,000 feet long. They were searching for and found rare orchids as they trudged up and down slippery trails, carrying large sacks filled with plants and carefully avoiding highly venomous pit vipers. They saw mesmerizing white water views of iconic whale-tail reefs just a glance away from bird's eye view of 3 of the biggest waterfalls in the country. There would be several red flags that were missed prior to John's death, but other family members. Now this photo is of a family dinner in 2006 with Ann's mother, brother, and grandparents. And despite the scenic surroundings of their home, the couple would continue to struggle with their mental health. Bender himself wrestled with bouts of depression. His wife would say this. Now the only addendum I would add to this one thing is not trusting the words of a woman who would use that depression against her husband following his untimely demise, need I say, at her hands. Now a friend of Bender's confirmed that he had been depressed for weeks before the night he died, but not to the level that he would harm himself or anyone else. Additionally, his wife said that Bender was despondent over the death of some of the animals in the preserve, and perhaps more importantly had been told by a lawyer who managed an extensive trust that the money was running out, that the money was drying up. Now, you're talking about a guy who had $600 million, and he had set money aside, a trust fund, just for that estate. This was not true. This statement about the trust fund insolvency was a lie. Mr. Bender set up a cash reserve in the amount of $80 million for that fund, and it was fully funded. Now, the trust fund was meant to take care of the land, the animals, the house, and his wife should Bender die. Now, once John set this trust up with the attorney that secured Borcon for him, it sealed his doom. I believe that the possibility to take control of that trust was his wife's motives for killing John. Anne wanted the money, no matter who she had to go through to get it, as we will show and share for you later. Approximately a year prior to John's murder, Anne began to waste away physically due to her contracting Lyme disease. Now, although Lyme disease is rarely life-threatening, delayed treatment can result in more severe symptoms. And self-medication coupled with her dire reaction to a mild occurrence caused her to begin to lose weight immediately. Now, it could be because of Lyme disease, or it could have been that she was a model. And she would treat the condition with intravenous morphine injections without a doctor's consent. Now, Anne would eventually become a shell of herself by losing almost half her body's weight. Now, as I said before, Anne at the same time was modeling, so she could have done it for that reason. But over the years that the couple lived in Borcon complex, it became a magnet for armed men that wished to do them harm through roadside attacks and attempted break-ins. Because of this, the wealthy expats were not strangers to paranoia. I mean, when somebody comes after you this way, of course you're going to be paranoid. And it said in about 2002, it was a particular incident involving an armed man who fired on the Bender's compound. John Bender went on a mission to fortify their property, which he stocked with a number of guns, including a pair of illegally purchased AK-47s. As time and seclusion and paranoia went on, John and Ann would continue struggling with their demons and would administer homemade remedies to one another. This was in hopes of getting a handle on their mental health problems. And if you have a mental health problem, you need somebody else outside of family. Now the couple had no children, but lived in isolation even from the staff who attended the house. Now this is according to Isaiah Baratitos, who worked with them for 4 years. Now nobody knew them more than this guy, except for one other employee that had been with them for 11. Now the Benders spent most of their time between floors 3 and 4 of the complex, to which no one had access. Now this is because on the second floor, there was an iron gate that remained closed due to all those armed incidents. Now the house had an elevator too, but it was standing on the 4th floor to prevent anyone from ascending. Remember, because of the armed attacks. Not too many, but enough is enough. Now on the living quarter floor, John and his wife spent hours and hours in front of the computers playing video games. Sort of like the Attack the Monsters with the Weapons, this sort of game. But then, on January 8, 2010, police answered a call to find Bender dead in a couple's bed with a gunshot wound to his neck. His wife would be found sitting next to him, holding his hand and shaking uncontrollably when authorities arrived. Upon police arrival, Bender's wife, Ann, reported that her husband shot himself, but the facts on the scene lean heavily towards murder. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. Now, police would note at the scene that John slept naked, covered by a sheet and 2 blankets only. He was wearing earplugs to keep out the noise so he could sleep. Shocking, the reaction of a wife who claims to be concerned about her husband's well-being would do this after his death. Now, why would someone who promised to love, honor, and cherish shoot you in the back of the head, take several pills, and leave the room to visit the World Wide Web? I mean, you could have done it on your own time. Ann Bender, which was John Bender's American bride of 11 years, who was 5 years younger than he, didn't much seem to care. When Ann was good and ready, she formulated her alibi, then made a distress call to the main guard shack, which was within walking distance from the main complex. "Help, help," she said. And that was the cry that went out on the phone. Bender's wife would attempt to cry out desperately and believably on the radio at 12:15 a.m. And she did this to make her concern seem believable. In all of these killer wives cases, and I do mean all, when the wife calls on the phone, she's trying to make the dispatcher or guard believe her. And when the supervisor of the guards, Osvaldo Aguilar from the Imperial Park Company, arrived at the scene, so the man suffered. He didn't die immediately. Now, Osvaldo immediately took John's pulse and confirmed that he was dead. Now, typically when one spouse kills another, there's an immediacy to involve naive bystanders or friends in their alibi. Now, Ann would tell the story to Osvaldo so he would believe it and pass it on to his leadership at the guardhouse, as well as any future court inquiry. And a lot of times when wives kill their husband, what they do is they prepare for the court case that will follow. Now, for what Osvaldo understood from Ann was apparently the couple had gone to bed at 11 p.m. and she was very tired because she had not slept well for days, she said. That they were both lying on their backs and talking in a low voice when she heard John say that he had a weapon and that he wanted to kill himself and that he was going to teach her what it was like to be with a dead person. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard anybody in my natural life say anything like this. Now, but Ann's version of events held about as much water as a leaky sieve. For one, John was left-handed, which would have been virtually impossible to shoot himself successfully in the back of his head with his right hand. Second, John was not in a disturbed position at the time of death, but yet in a fetal position, laying in bed with earplugs in his ears, in a relaxed state. In other words, there was no signs of scuffle for the gun as Ann implied. Third, John's hands tested negative for gunshot residue, but Ann's tested positive, as well as the keyboard she used shortly after she shot him. What further debunks Ann's version of events is in the event that John had committed suicide, John would have received a contact shot that would have left him with a well-known smoking ring or what is known as stippling of his skin. Now, absent this residue means that the shot did not come from close range. If John had to make that right-handed shot from his left hand in a contorted fashion, he would be less effective in killing himself. Not to mention the distance of the shot was beyond the range of his arm's length. So he had to have his hand way back here and the opposite hand. In the progress of investigation, traces of gunshot residue would be revealed not only on the computer she used after the incident, but on the bloody clothing that was confiscated from her for analysis. Every time you go to a police station when a spouse is dead, they take your clothes. And so ladies, if you plan on doing that, know that they're going to do this. And after her interview at the police station, Miss Bender was taken to and admitted to SEMA Hospital in Costa Rica. Now she was admitted there by her attorney, Eric Ramos, in a ploy, I believe, to keep her out of jail. He noted to medical officials that she arrived with a serious picture of malnutrition and a psychiatric crisis. Now he's a lawyer, not a doctor. Now Mrs. Bender would be allowed to extend her hospital stay for 6 months before being questioned again about her husband's murder. Now the best way to go is insanity or a psychiatric location. Now, in close inspection of the top floor of the Bender estate, authorities discovered millions of dollars of rare rubies and diamonds. Now it is not clear either the origin or destination of the millionaire consignment of jewels, which weighed more than 220 pounds. That is a lot of jewels. Now one of these packages with 14 or 16 stones had a purchase invoice attached, dated the previous year for $8.5 million. Now police confiscated all the rare gems because they were not sure if they had been smuggled into the country illegally. Now the jewels were transferred to the vaults of the central bank by air. In addition, some 300 Tiffany lamps and dozens of cut glass works were seized. So these were all the values that it took out of the home after she was taken to the hospital. The authorities seized some catalogs from Bender's house, and it seems that perhaps at some point in Anne's life, she would have been a model, as I said before, and that she ate very little, because models eat very little. Sometimes they vomit. The employees as well as security on site were questioned in the absence of the widow, a one Mr. Osvaldo Rojas, with 10 years working for the Benders, and the closest employee to the couple described John as a person with his good days and his bad days. But that's what friends can say. Now when Anne was in better physical condition to serve trial, she was charged with first-degree murder, so she couldn't get out of that. The prosecution alleged that there were several holes in Patton's story. Now, some of which were, the trajectory of the bullet was particularly suspect. Now, the attorney argued that the bullet passed from the lower right-hand side of Bender's neck, so here at the bottom, and back into the left side of his brain, but it did not penetrate. Now, the likelihood of suicide, they argued, rested on whether or not Bender was right-handed or left-handed, a simple fact that remains vehemently disputed, but everybody knew that Bender was left-handed, so therefore he cannot take a gun, put it behind his own neck at an angle, and shoot himself in the brain. Now the prosecution argued that Bender was left-handed but would have had to hold the gun with his right hand to make the killing shot. Bender's head of security for the refuge, however, testified that one-time financier could shoot with both hands, and some people can. Now Patton, of course, also knew how to handle a gun, as her husband had shown her how. So he actually teaches his wife how to use a gun, and then she used it on him. Now, the state also cast doubt about Bender's intention to end his life because of how he was found in the bed. The court documents report that he was found lying on the bed, resting on 3 pillows and wearing earplugs. And his legs were also bent in what the prosecution argued was a sleeping position, inconsistent with suicide. Now, another question dealt with the lack of gunpowder residue on Bender's hand. Then Patton reportedly wiped her hands with napkins that tested positive for gunshot residue. And so next time you do this, ladies, make sure you get rid of the gun, make sure you wipe down the keyboard, don't be an idiot. But after a culmination of facts, on January 2013, Patton was acquitted of her husband's murder. But this is one of those cases where the judgment of the court only deepens the mystery. Then the prosecution would refile charges against her for murder, and the decision was less of a declaration of Patton's innocence than an indictment of the prosecution's case. Now, the judge ruled that the forensic evidence presented by the state was inconclusive and acknowledged that Patton could have killed her husband to start. So even though the court does not agree with the way she was defended or aggressed against, they do believe that she may have killed her husband. Now, curiously, Patton's accuser never came up with a reason she'd have to kill her husband. In the court record, they claim she acted without any apparent motive, but a clear intent to end the life of the victim, John Felix Bender. And I'll never understand how you honor somebody by getting in front of ministers saying, I promise to love, honor, and cherish, then shooting him. And the prosecution office was able to retry her again under the murder, one, because there is no protection against double jeopardy in Costa Rica. A superior criminal court ruled that the first trial incorrectly reviewed the evidence and alleged inconsistencies in her testimony. An appeals court ordered a retrial in August of 2013. And Patton's second trial for the murder of her husband began on Monday, May the 23rd of that same year. Now, if found guilty that time, the 43-year-old widow would face 25 years sentence in Costa Rica's overcrowded and miserable prisons, and she did not want that. On the initial day of her second trial, Patton leaned her small frame on a cane as she walked with difficulty into the pale green courtroom in San Isidro. Now, she wanted them to feel sorry for her. And Patton told a local news channel in a quivering voice, I had no doubt that everything is going to end up okay. I know the truth. Actually, she knows her truth, not the truth. But prosecuting attorney Edgar Ramirez told the court that the state had irrefutable evidence proving Patton killed her husband in his sleep and began to build again a picture of obsession and excess in the jungle. Like I said before, it's just like the movie. Now, the prosecutor's office confirmed that precious stones worth $7 million, some mounted in jewelry, others loose about the house, were found by police the night Bender died. Prosecution alleged the jewels were contraband and seized them immediately. So those become part of a case, later accusing them of smuggling, which they weren't, they just bought the diamonds. And then there were the guns. The couple at the time claimed that they were attacked by corrupt Costa Rican police officers in 2001, allegedly hired to intimidate them by U.S. citizens who had sued Bender because of his previous business dealings. This has not been proven true. Now, Patton's lawyers, Fabio Acontrillo, acknowledged in a television interview that Bender developed a fondness for guns after the police encounter. And the couple had purchased several small arms, obtained permits, and learned to shoot. Authorities also found a shotgun and an unregistered AK-47 automatic rifle in that home. Now, that's somebody who's scared. When Patton was called to testify, she gripped her cane again like a much older woman and blinked back the tears welling in her large, dark eyes as she took the stand to save her life. Now, according to local reports, the millionaires had been suspected of bringing piles of jewels from Africa to sell them at exclusive auctions held at her home. So this was more of her business. He gave her as much money as she liked. He bought as many of those jewels as she liked. Now, after a week-long trial, again, a Costa Rican court acquitted Miss Bender, but the prosecution announced that it would appeal the verdict once more, a move that would not have been allowed under U.S. legal system, but is acceptable in the country of Costa Rica. A lot of people are glad they're in this country. Now, a three-judge panel called for a new trial based on assertion that the judges in the original trial had ignored a number of major discrepancies in the case. Among them, John Bender's position at the time of his death, which was said to be inconsistent with suicide, and the lack of gunpowder residue on his hands. And Bender had vowed against the ruling, calling it persecution against her and her dead husband. How could it be persecution? You killed him. Now, since her husband's death, Patton had lived a much simpler life. She was embroiled in a lawsuit against her former lawyer for control of her husband's estate and trust fund, which she was after from the start. Now, Patton depended on the support of friends and family to pay her rent for an apartment in Escazú, which was a wealthy suburb of the capital, San Jose. Now, Patton said she plans to reopen the refuge, saying that it was what John would have wanted. What John would have wanted was to live, not just for the refuge to carry on. Now, after Miss Bender was tried for the third time, she was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to prison for over 2 decades. But our story doesn't end then. Wait a minute, there's more. And seemingly by some weird twist of fate, Pat was again vindicated while she was in prison of the crime. Now, this is the luckiest person on the planet. Now, she retrieved her passport from authorities and returned to live on the east coast of the United States. She was not going back to Costa Rica. She knew she was going to prison. Now, Patton fought for the Costa Rican government and had them return the $8.5 million in rare gems. She successfully sued the trust manager for the inheritance. And she placed Boracon up for sale. So she's going to profit in 3 ways. Now, at least she can expect to receive from the entire haul is about $32 to $38 million. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I guess in some cases crime does pay, and pay heavily. For Killer Wives, this is Charles Rivers. We thank you for watching.
Until next time.